Wyoming Territory, 1878. The prairie wind swept across the eastern slopes of the Wind River Range, carrying with it the scent of sagebrush and the distant promise of rain. 19-year-old Felicity Campbell stood at the edge of her family's modest ranch, her golden blonde hair whipping around her face as she gripped the corral fence with white knuckles. Her faded blue calico dress, patched at the elbows but clean and well-kept, fluttered against her slender frame as she stared at the wild mustang that had just been brought in. "She will never be broken," declared her stepmother, Martha, a hard-faced woman whose arrival 2 years prior had transformed Felicity's life into a waking nightmare. Just like someone else I know. Felicity knew the barb was meant for her. Since her father's death 6 months ago, Martha had made it clear that Felicity's stubborn refusal to marry the wealthy rancher from Laramie, a man 30 years her senior, was as foolish as trying to tame this wild horse. But Felicity believed that true freedom was worth fighting for, even if it meant enduring Martha's cruelty. What Martha called stubbornness, Felicity called survival. Wild things belong wild, Felicity whispered to herself, watching the mustang, a magnificent Palomino mare, pace the corral, or they die inside. She knew this truth better than most. Since her mother's death when she was 12 and her father's remarriage, Felicity had learned that showing her true self invited only pain. Better to hide her dreams, her longing for something more than this hardscrabble existence. Better to believe that in this harsh land, dreams of love and belonging were dangerous luxuries she couldn't afford. The following morning, Felicity rose before dawn, as she did every day, to complete her chores before Martha awoke. The early hours were her sanctuary, the only time when she could breathe without feeling Martha's disapproving gaze. As she approached the barn, she heard a soft nickering. The Palomino mare watched her through the corral slats, her intelligent eyes following Felicity's every move. "They will break you today," Felicity said softly, approaching the fence. "But I know what that feels like. I will not watch." She turned to enter the barn when the sound of approaching hoofbeats made her freeze. Visitors at this hour could mean nothing good. Bandits had been raiding isolated ranches throughout the territory, and with only herself, Martha, and the elderly ranch hand Silas to defend the place, they were vulnerable. Instead of outlaws, however, a single rider appeared on the horizon. As he drew closer, Felicity could make out a lean young man on a handsome chestnut gelding. He rode with the easy confidence of someone born to the saddle, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the pink-gold sunrise. The rider pulled up at the edge of the yard and dismounted in one fluid motion. He removed his hat, revealing thick, dark hair and a face that made Felicity's breath catch. Not because of its undeniable handsomeness, with strong cheekbones and clear blue eyes, but because of the kindness that radiated from his expression. A light stubble dusted his jaw, and though his clothes were trail-worn, they were neat and well-kept. "Morning, ma'am," he said, his voice deeper than his youthful appearance. Perhaps 25 years would suggest. "Preston Dawson, I heard you might be looking for help with the spring roundup." Felicity hesitated. Martha handled all ranch business now, but the thought of turning away this potential help before her stepmother could hire someone else, someone rough and cruel like the men she typically employed, made her speak up. "My stepmother manages hiring," she said carefully. "But we lost most of our hands last month. They left for the railroad jobs." Preston nodded, his eyes drifting to the Palomino. "That's a fine horse," he remarked. "Wild caught." "Yesterday," Felicity replied, unable to hide the disapproval in her voice. "Martha's planning to break her today. She thinks anything wild needs to be subdued." Something flashed across Preston's face, recognition, perhaps, or understanding. "Some things aren't meant to be broken," he said quietly. "Only understood." The moment hung between them, fragile and unexpected, until Martha's sharp voice cut through the dawn stillness. "Felicity Campbell, who are you speaking to?" The spell broken, Felicity stiffened. "A rider looking for work, ma'am." Martha emerged from the house, her eyes narrowing as she assessed Preston. "We need someone who can handle difficult horses," she said coldly. "The last thing we need is another soft touch around here." Preston straightened, something steely appearing beneath his gentle demeanor. "Ma'am, I've been breaking horses since I was 12. But the best ones I never had to break at all. They came around because they wanted to, not because they were forced." Martha's lips thinned, but Felicity could see the calculation in her eyes. Good hands were scarce, and Preston looked capable. $2 a day, room in the bunkhouse. Prove yourself with that wild mare, and we'll talk about keeping you on. As Martha stalked back to the house, Preston turned to Felicity with a slight smile. She seems determined. That's one word for it. Felicity murmured, then caught herself. The bunkhouse is this way. You can stable your horse in the main barn. As they walked, Felicity maintained a careful distance, even as questions burned within her. Where had he come from? What was his story? Most importantly, why did his presence make her feel both unsettled and, strangely, safer than she had in months? That mare, Preston said as they reached the barn. She reminds me of one I knew as a boy. Had a spirit that wouldn't quit. Martha will see that as a flaw to fix, Felicity said bitterly. Preston's gaze was steady. Some see spirit as the most valuable thing a horse, or a person, can have. The words lingered between them, dangerous in their understanding. Felicity quickly showed him to the bunkhouse, then hurried back to her chores, unaware that this chance encounter had already begun to challenge her most fundamental belief, that in this harsh frontier world, keeping your head down and your heart closed was the only way to survive. 2 days later, Felicity stood transfixed at the corral fence, watching Preston with the Palomino mare. Unlike the brutal breaking methods she had witnessed before, the ropes, the hobbles, the forced submission, Preston simply sat on the fence, talking softly to the nervous horse. Each day, he moved a little closer, never pushing, never demanding. This isn't how you break a horse, Martha complained on the 3rd day, arms crossed as she watched Preston offer an apple to the mare, who was now cautiously approaching him. At this rate, she'll be too old to ride by the time she's trained. She's learning to trust him, Felicity observed, unable to hide her wonder. Martha snorted. Trust is for fools. That beast needs to learn who's master. But by the 5th day, the Palomino was eating from Preston's hand. By the 7th, she allowed him to stroke her neck. And on the 10th day, as Felicity watched from the barn doorway, Preston slipped a light rope around the mare's neck and led her willingly around the corral. How did you do that? Felicity asked later, as they sat on the porch steps eating the evening meal. Martha was in town, meeting with the banker about the ranch's mounting debts, a fact she thought Felicity didn't know. Preston shrugged. You can't force someone to trust you. You can only prove you're trustworthy and wait for them to decide. Is that how you've always handled horses? A shadow crossed his face. No, I learned the hard way. My father was like your stepmother, believed anything wild needed to be conquered. I watched him break horses and spirits until... He paused, then shook his head. Until I decided there had to be a better way. Felicity studied his profile in the fading light. Where is your family now? Don't have one anymore. My father died in a fall from a horse that never should have been ridden. My mother passed from fever last winter. I've been drifting since, working ranches, learning different ways of doing things. I'm sorry, Felicity said softly. Life out here is hard. Preston replied, his voice matter of fact. Most folks don't make it past 40. That's why I can't understand people who make it harder than it needs to be. Their eyes met, and Felicity felt something shift inside her, a crack in the wall she had built around her heart. This man saw the world differently than anyone she had ever known. He understood that strength didn't have to mean cruelty, that gentleness wasn't weakness. But such thoughts were dangerous. Martha was already watching them too closely, her eyes narrowing whenever she caught them talking. And the banker in town, Mr. Hollister, Martha's choice for Felicity's husband, was growing impatient. Felicity knew that if she showed any interest in Preston, Martha would find a reason to send him away. So she guarded her expressions, limited their conversations, and tried to ignore the warmth that flooded her chest whenever he was near. She had survived this long by keeping her feelings locked away. She would continue to do so. Yet fate had other plans. 2 weeks after Preston's arrival, a violent spring storm struck the ranch. Thunder boomed overhead as rain poured in sheets, turning the yard into a muddy river. Felicity had just secured the chickens when she heard a terrible splintering crash. The corral, Preston shouted, appearing beside her in the downpour. Lightning struck the fence. Together they raced toward the corral, where the panicked horses were pushing against the damaged section. As they arrived, the weakened rails gave way completely, and the horses bolted, all except the Palomino, who reared in terror as another lightning bolt illuminated the sky. "She's too frightened to run," Felicity cried. Without hesitation, Preston vaulted over the remaining fence and approached the terrified mare, his movements slow and deliberate despite the raging storm. Felicity held her breath as he reached the horse, speaking words she couldn't hear over the thunder. Then, in a moment that would change everything, the mare lowered her head, allowing Preston to grasp her mane. In one smooth motion, he swung onto her bare back, the first time anyone had mounted her, and guided her toward the opening. As they reached the fence line, the mare hesitated. Preston leaned forward, whispering something in her ear. Then, to Felicity's amazement, the horse turned not toward freedom, but toward her. The Palomino trotted directly to Felicity and stopped, as if waiting. "She wants you to come," Preston shouted over the storm. "She's choosing you." "I can't," Felicity began, but Preston extended his hand. "Trust her," he said simply. "Trust yourself." In that moment, with rain streaming down her face and thunder crashing overhead, Felicity made a choice that defied everything she thought she knew about survival. She reached up, clasped Preston's hand, and let him pull her onto the mare's back behind him. The Palomino carried them away from the ranch, toward a line of cottonwoods that offered shelter from the storm. As they huddled beneath the trees, Felicity became acutely aware of Preston's proximity, of her arms around his waist, of her cheek pressed against his back. "Why did she come to me?" Felicity asked, her voice barely audible above the rain. Preston turned to face her, their faces inches apart. "Animals know who sees them for what they are. You never looked at her like something to be conquered." "Neither did you," Felicity whispered. "I recognize kindred spirits," he replied, his eyes searching hers. "People who've been told their whole lives that their strength is something to be broken." The truth of his words pierced Felicity's carefully constructed defenses. "Martha says my stubbornness will be my ruin." "Your spirit is your salvation," Preston countered. "It's what's kept you alive all this time." And then, with the storm raging around them and the mare standing patient beneath the trees, Preston Dawson did the unthinkable. He brushed a strand of wet hair from Felicity's face, his touch gentle as a whisper. "I've never met anyone like you," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Someone who endures so much but still sees beauty in wildness." The kiss that followed was as inevitable as the sunrise, tender at first, then deepening with a hunger that shocked Felicity with its intensity. For years, she had believed that allowing herself to want, to feel, to love would only lead to pain. Yet here, in the midst of chaos, she found herself opening like a flower to the sun, responding to Preston's touch with a passion she never knew she possessed. When they finally broke apart, breathless and trembling, Felicity knew that something fundamental had changed. The walls she had built so carefully were crumbling, and the truth she had denied for so long stood revealed. The human heart, like the wild frontier itself, could not be truly alive unless it was free to love. But such freedom came with terrible risk. The storm passed, but the tempest within Felicity's heart only grew stronger. In the weeks that followed, she and Preston developed a connection that went beyond words. They worked side by side during the day, stealing moments together when Martha wasn't watching. Each evening, Felicity would slip away to the far pasture where Preston was teaching her to ride the Palomino mare, whom she had named Liberty. "She responds to the lightest touch," Preston explained one evening, watching Felicity guide Liberty with just the pressure of her knees. "She doesn't need a bit or spurs to understand what you want. Because she chooses to listen," Felicity said, understanding flowing between them. As spring blossomed into summer, so did their love, hidden like wildflowers in the shadow of Martha's tyranny. Preston revealed more of his past, his dreams of having his own ranch someday, his belief that the frontier didn't have to harden a person's heart. Felicity shared her memories of her father before Martha, of the gentle man who had taught her to love the land. But their idyll couldn't last. Martha's suspicious glances turned to outright hostility as she noticed the changes in Felicity, the straightened spine, the direct gaze, the quiet confidence that was replacing her former submission. "Mr. Hollister asked about you again yesterday," Martha announced one evening at dinner. "He's prepared to offer $3,000 for this ranch and take you as his bride. With his money and this land combined, you'd want for nothing." Except happiness, Felicity replied, then bit her tongue, shocked at her own boldness. Martha's face darkened. Happiness? What nonsense has that cowboy been filling your head with? Happiness doesn't feed you when winter comes. It doesn't keep a roof over your head. Neither does marrying a man I don't love. The words hung in the air between them, a declaration of war. Martha's eyes narrowed to slits. Love, she hissed. Is that what you think you found with that drifter? Do you think he cares for anything but getting his hands on this land? Preston isn't like that, Felicity protested. Preston? Martha spat the name like poison. Preston Dawson. Did he tell you his father was Jeremiah Dawson? The man who cheated your father out of his best grazing land 15 years ago? The man whose actions drove your mother to an early grave with worry? The room seemed to tilt beneath Felicity's feet. You're lying. Am I? Ask him yourself. Ask him if his father didn't steal 500 head of cattle from ranchers all across the territory. Ask him if the Dawson name isn't cursed in 3 counties. Martha's smile was cruel. Go on. Ask him why he never mentioned his full name to anyone but you. That night, with her world collapsing around her, Felicity confronted Preston by the corral, where Liberty watched them with alert eyes. Is it true? She demanded, her voice breaking. Was your father Jeremiah Dawson? Preston's face went pale in the moonlight. Felicity, just answer me. Yes, he admitted, his shoulders slumping. But I'm not my father. I've spent my whole life trying to make up for what he did. Did he steal from my father? Did he help cause my mother's death? Preston's silence was answer enough. Felicity turned away, tears streaming down her face. Felicity, please, Preston reached for her. I came here by chance, I swear it. I didn't know this was your family's ranch until Martha mentioned your father's name that first day. By then, I was already, he stopped. Already what? Felicity whispered. Already falling in love with you. He finished, his voice raw. I should have told you the truth sooner. I was afraid of losing you before I had a chance to prove I'm not my father. How can I believe anything you say now? Felicity demanded, the pain of betrayal cutting deep. You let me open my heart to you, something I swore I would never do. And all this time, you were hiding this. I wanted to tell you 1,000 times, Preston said desperately. But with each day that passed, it got harder to find the words. Please, Felicity, judge me for who I am, not for my father's sins. But the damage was done. The trust between them, so carefully cultivated, lay shattered like glass. Felicity turned and ran, her tears blinding her, her heart breaking with every step. The next morning, Martha informed the ranch hands that Preston had been dismissed. When Felicity rushed to the bunkhouse, she found it empty, his few possessions gone. Only a folded note remained on the narrow bed. I will make this right, it read. Wait for me. But how could she wait? How could she trust again when the very foundation of their relationship had been built on a lie? The walls around her heart, temporarily breached by love, now rebuilt themselves stronger than before. This, she told herself, was why she had always known that love was a luxury she couldn't afford. This was why vulnerability was dangerous in a world where even the kindest eyes could hide the darkest truths. For 2 weeks, Felicity moved through her days like a ghost. She avoided the corral where Liberty watched for her, ignored Martha's smug satisfaction, and tried to numb herself to the pain that threatened to consume her. When Martha announced that Mr. Hollister would be coming to dinner to formalize their arrangement, Felicity didn't even protest. What did it matter now? Her dreams of love had died the moment Preston's deception was revealed. The night before Hollister's visit, Felicity found herself drawn to the corral despite her resolve. Liberty whickered softly as she approached, pressing her velvet nose against Felicity's palm. He betrayed us both, Felicity whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. We were fools to trust him. Liberty tossed her head, as if disagreeing. Then, to Felicity's astonishment, the mare turned and trotted to the far side of the corral, where something glinted in the moonlight. Curious despite her grief, Felicity followed. There, tucked between the fence posts, was a small leather pouch. Inside, she found a stack of bank notes and legal documents, along with another note in Preston's handwriting. These belong to my father, it read. His ill-gotten gains from the years of theft. I've spent 5 years tracking down every dollar he stole and returning it to the families he wronged. This is the last of it, what he took from your family. I should have given it to you the moment I realized whose daughter you were. My shame kept me silent, and for that, I will never forgive myself. But know this, everything else between us was real. My love for you is the truest thing I have ever known. If you can find it in your heart to forgive me, meet me at the cottonwoods where we first kissed. If not, use this money to secure your freedom from Martha and Hollister. Either way, you deserve to be as wild and free as Liberty herself. Felicity read the note 3 times, her hands trembling. The banknotes would be enough to pay off the ranch's debts and buy out Martha's share. She could be free, free from her stepmother's control, free from Hollister's unwanted advances. Free, but alone. As the sun rose the next morning, Martha found Felicity in the kitchen, fully dressed, her face set with determination. I won't be marrying Mr. Hollister, Felicity announced calmly. Martha's face contorted with rage. You most certainly will. The papers are already drawn up. He arrives at noon. The papers won't be valid, Felicity replied, placing the bank notes on the table. This is enough to buy out your share of the ranch. You can take it and go back east like you've always wanted, or you can fight me in court. But either way, I won't be sold to a man I don't love. Where did you get this money? Martha demanded, her eyes widening at the sum. From someone who understood that some debts can never truly be repaid, but still try to make things right. Martha's face flushed with angry understanding. That cowboy? You've been seeing him behind my back. No, Felicity said, surprised by her own calm. But he taught me something important before he left. He taught me that my spirit isn't something to be broken. It's something to be cherished. The confrontation that followed was bitter, but brief. Martha, faced with the prospect of a comfortable return to Philadelphia versus a protracted legal battle, chose the money. By midday, she was packing her trunks, and Felicity was saddling Liberty. The ride to the cottonwoods was both the longest and shortest journey of Felicity's life. Each hoofbeat matched the pounding of her heart as questions tumbled through her mind. Would Preston still be waiting? Could she truly forgive his deception? And even if she could, what future could they possibly have together with the weight of the past between them? As the trees came into view, Felicity saw a solitary figure standing beside a chestnut gelding. Preston turned at the sound of Liberty's approach, his face showing both hope and fear. Felicity dismounted, letting the reins drop as Liberty immediately moved to greet Preston's horse with a friendly nicker. You came, Preston said simply, his voice rough with emotion. I almost didn't, Felicity admitted, keeping her distance. What you did, hiding who you were, was unforgivable, Preston finished for her. I know that. I wouldn't blame you if you turned around right now and never looked back. Then why are you here? She asked. Why ask me to come? Preston took a step forward, then stopped himself, respecting the space between them. Because even if you can never forgive me, I needed you to know the whole truth. My father was a thief and a liar. He taught me that the only way to survive out here was to take what you wanted and damn the consequences. For years after he died, I followed in his footsteps. He paused, looking toward the distant mountains. Then one day, I watched a man forgive his son for stealing his horse. Instead of punishment, he offered understanding. It broke something open in me, made me see that I had a choice about the kind of man I wanted to be. So you started making amends? Felicity said softly. Preston nodded. 5 years of tracking down every person my father wronged. Your family was the last on my list. I never planned to stay here, never planned to fall in love. But then I met you, and for the first time, I could imagine a future beyond my past. He met her gaze directly. I don't expect your forgiveness, Felicity. I just want you to know that what we shared was real. My feelings for you are real. And whatever you decide, I will honor it. Felicity studied the man before her, his honest blue eyes, the tension in his shoulders, the way he stood straight and faced her without excuse or deflection. In that moment, she realized that true courage wasn't about never making mistakes. It was about facing them head-on and doing the difficult work of atonement. My father used to say that a person should be judged not by their worst day, but by what they do afterward, she said finally. You could have taken your father's money and started a new life anywhere. Instead, you spent years trying to make things right. It wasn't enough, Preston said quietly. Nothing could be. No, Felicity agreed. But it was necessary. Just as necessary as my forgiving you now. Hope flickered across Preston's face. Felicity. She closed the distance between them slowly, each step a conscious choice. I don't know if I can trust easily again, she warned. But I want to try, because what I felt with you, what I feel for you, is worth the risk. When their lips met, it wasn't with the desperate passion of their first kiss, but with something deeper, more profound, a promise of honesty, of healing, of a love strong enough to weather the harsh realities of frontier life. What happens now? Preston asked when they finally parted, his forehead resting against hers. Felicity smiled, feeling truly free for the first time in years. Now we build something new. Together. 2 years later, the Campbell-Dawson Ranch stood as testimony to what could be accomplished when two strong spirits worked in harmony. The house, expanded and repaired, gleamed with fresh paint. The herd had doubled, managed using Preston's gentle methods that were now drawing attention from ranchers across the territory. In the corral nearest the house, Liberty, now the matriarch of a small but growing herd of palominos, watched over her first foal, a golden colt with his mother's intelligent eyes and fearless spirit. On the porch, Felicity sat in a rocking chair, her rounded belly evidence of the new life that would join their family before summer's end. Preston knelt beside her, his hand gently resting on her abdomen, his face alight with wonder as he felt their child kick. He's strong, Preston said, grinning. Like his mother. Or she's spirited, like her father, Felicity countered, running her fingers through his hair. Preston leaned up to kiss her, his love evident in every gentle touch. Either way, our child will know what took us both so long to learn. What's that? Felicity asked, though she already knew the answer. That out here, where life is hardest, love isn't a luxury. His eyes, warm and steady, held hers. It's the only thing that makes survival worthwhile. As the sun set over the Wind River Range, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Felicity Campbell Dawson looked out over the land she had fought so hard to keep. But more precious than any deed or title was the knowledge that she had found a love strong enough to heal old wounds, brave enough to face hard truths, and wild enough to match her own untamed heart. In this harsh and beautiful frontier, they had created something that neither of them had believed possible, a home where spirit was celebrated, not broken, and where love had proven itself the greatest act of courage of all.